Welcome in, everybody. We are so glad to be back here tonight, and my beautiful bride is back.
I'm back. And we got a little one right here. Soft launch. Y'all can't really see her, but she's here.
Yeah, and so it was really good to just be back in the house of the Lord, preaching and talking with my wife this week, and just we're thankful that she's here and she's healthy, and the baby's here and she's healthy as well. As you see, we got mics, so we're testing this out in our first podcast with the mics.
Moving on up like the Jeffersons.
Yeah, so
that
it's
was so country.
it happens to the best of us.
Gosh.
That's what I've realized. I've realized that, like, living in Oklahoma, you're going to have some type of country accent. It's going to come out
it just
here,
comes
there,
out.
and Texas.
Certain words, like words that have like the A and K, like thank.
Yeah. Well,
thank
if you say it like that, yes.
Thank you.
Here's the funny thing. In college, I would tell people I'm from Oklahoma, right? And they was like, "Really? You don't have an accent?" I'm like, "Yeah, I don't. I really don't have an accent." But
it happens.
It happened. It happened. It would come out here and there, and you'd be like, "Oh my gosh!"
And there it is.
And there it is. So we have it. We have it.
Yeah.
Last week was just me solo dolo, and I hope you guys really received that message, and I hope it was something that resonated with you guys. And we're so glad to do this and to have the means to do this because there's a lot of, I probably shouldn't say, but there's a lot of, I get tired of just hearing the bickering babble that is online when it comes to people with podcasts. Because there's a lot of negative podcasts out there, and what we're trying to do is to be a positive one, an uplifting one, and one that I hope helps us be better.
Yeah, and I mean, there's going to be topics that we talk about that may be a little touchy, I guess. But like he said, overall, we just want to uplift you all, uplift relationships in general, because people are out here like, I don't need relationships and all this stuff, and that's not true. God didn't make us to be alone, so
no. He didn't make us to be isolation creatures.
Right, and and y'all, I've said it before. I like being in the house, so this is definitely something I have to work on. But yeah, and I just wanted to shout out. Applause. I can't really applaud right now, but applause to my husband. He did an awesome job by himself last week. I was here, so I was like, we were in the house. I had a home birth. So, I was in the other room listening through the wall. I just wanted to applaud him for still going forth without me. He did an amazing job. And, y'all are going to hear a baby today. So there's that. But, we're working on it. This is real. This is why we call it happily ever after hours, because people talk about like, oh, I can't wait to get married and the fairy tale, but then you forget about all the other things that come with life.
All the other things.
And that includes trying to do a podcast with a toddler and a baby.
Or just life in general. What you did before is not going to work, now when you add new people in there, being children. So today's message, I feel is a really good one. And again, as always, I feel like it is a message that's on time.
Right.
And we're going to get into how I feel about it and what I went through my life with it. And then obviously she's going to. And then, last week I didn't do the question because it would have been weird just to have the question for myself.
Travis, myself said,
Right. I said, and there's a saying for that. You got to watch the Boondocks to get the saying.
Oh,
okay. Today's message is I am whole. Right? My name is I am whole. Right? I'm not scrabbling for anything. I'm not trying to fill it with anything. I'm whole. And God has said that I'm whole.
Right.
And again, as I say, because of Pastor Daniels, I've got book to back me up. Right? And today's verse is from a prophet, Jeremiah. And Jeremiah was a young guy, right? And that's what I love about Jeremiah too. You have people say, oh, I can't do it because I'm young or whatever. Jeremiah was a teenager.
Right.
Being a prophet. And so he had a lot of wisdom at his early age. And all this great, I sometimes feel like I have wisdom. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But out of Jeremiah 24:7, it says, then I will give them a heart to know me, that I am the Lord, and they shall be my people, and I will be their God, for they shall return to me with their whole heart. Right then and there, that preaches.
Absolutely.
But again, we're not here to preach. We're just here to talk about what that is and what that means to me and what that means to my wife, and hopefully what that means to you, you listeners out there. And so, to start us off, what does that mean for you, that I am holy?
Oh man, a lot. It can mean, physically, it can mean mentally, emotionally, spiritually. It can go a lot of different ways, and I think it goes in different phases of life too. Speaking because of the relevancy, I guess that's the word I want to use, of what took place a week and a half ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You having a child changes you, but like me doing it at home was a completely different experience than me having our first daughter Robin in the hospital, just because there was so much that I missed in the hospital, because I did get an epidural and I don't really I was medically
kind of out of it.
Yeah, I was gonna say intoxicated, but that's
just kind of out of it.
Yeah,
you get the feel.
Yeah,
like you said, you felt some of the pressure.
Yeah, I felt the pressure when I was actually in active labor, but up until then I was just kind of chilling, and I don't really remember a whole lot of it. But I don't think I will forget Miss Rosalind's arrival, just because there was no medication at all. It was supposed to be a water birth that kind of helps with the pain, but the water birth didn't go as planned, so it was a free birth. So I felt everything. Everything. And that is a story in itself. But I bring that up because I a couple days after that, I remember turning to Travis and I was just like, I feel empty, in my stomach. I feel empty, because for 9 months I was growing a human, and now and that whole time I would say I feel like I I ate too much or something like that. I felt full. But then after having her, it was this weird void in my stomach, and I think that's kind of when you're not whole within yourself as well. Using that as an example physically or as a metaphor, but even in an emotional state, or even in a spiritual state, you go through those moments where you feel something is just missing, you don't know what it is, and you're I know something used to be there, but I can't figure out what's gone. And so I would say in my life, maybe my early 20s, college years, trying to just figure out who I was without my parents, or just the guidance of the people that I normally saw throughout the high school days. It changes you, because you're okay, I know who I am, but something is missing. And it's you're trying to figure that out, and it takes you really understanding your identity and who you are and what your name is, what we've been talking about, to figure out what that emptiness was. And for me, it was my relationship with God. I still went to church. I still was volunteering and teaching my outreach dance, Christian dance team and everything like that, but I still felt like something was missing, and it was my relationship with God got stagnant, and it made me feel like there was some hole missing, and I couldn't figure it out. So I just covered it with hanging out with certain people.
Yeah, and I'll agree to that, because that's exactly kind of how mine was in college. And I've told some people this, and they're like, "No way," but I got to go back to Wyoming and see my little brother. He was getting recruited there. I thought he was out there, but me and my brother went out there. He's committed to Texas State. I'm so happy for him. But we went out there, and I got to see a buddy of mine, and he is doing a tremendous job at helping those collegiate athletes with some hard times that they're going to face throughout their time there in Laramie, just being a college athlete. And so I I remember in college, okay, so in high school, I had been an FCA, right? I lost my brother at 12. And when he died, I kind of lost a bit of myself. So I felt empty in that sense. I didn't have my role model, my big brother, there to kind of teach me how to be a guy. My dad wasn't in the picture necessarily. He was an in and out person. And so I'd rather you not be there
Right.
rather than just coming in and going out. Like, so there was a lot of inconsistency there. And so in college, I'm by myself. I'm 18. I've moved 1,100 miles away from home. I have nobody out there. And in my first year, I really didn't know. But that second year, I really started to get depressed. I'm playing collegiate football. And I'm filling my hole that I felt empty inside with alcohol, with women, some drugs here and there, not anything crazy, just weed, nothing crazy. But filling it with people, I still felt empty. And I was not a complete person when I was in college. And nobody's complete at 20, 21, 22. Nobody's complete. And hell, even at right now at 37, I'm still not complete. I'm still figuring out how to be a better me.
There's definitely moments.
So like I told you last week, it was like, I felt God told me to go to Wyoming. I prayed and I did all these things, and I was like, I felt Wyoming was the place for me to be. But I was still empty while I'm also having the time of my life, playing collegiate football, getting to meet a lot of new people, and doing things that I probably didn't have no business doing. That's when I got out of college and I realized God was protecting me more than I knew while I was in college. I went to one church service Easter Sunday with my buddy Darius and Darion. And Darius, he looked like he came with the whole 10. He looked.
He said, "I know what."
He knew what to wear.
I know what I need to
He
wear.
came with the suit, and he looked Dapper Dan. So he knew. But in a sense, still, I was empty, and that's what I did know. And I didn't know what I needed to fill it with, which brings me to our first point, which is overcompensation.
Yeah.
I was filling myself up with everything else but God. Right? And I wasn't reading my Bible at the time. I wasn't trying to have a relationship with God. I was still angry at God for taking my brother. And I got to that point my senior year when I realized that I had an abandonment issue that dealt with the loss of my brother, that dealt with not really necessarily having my dad around. I felt abandoned. Dealt with some people that I was talking to that left. So I just felt like I was always trying to overcompensate for things that I didn't have.
Yeah.
And filling it with people that I probably shouldn't have. Not at that respect that they were bad people, but just because I wasn't where I needed to be to treat them fairly. Right?
Yeah.
So I think that kind of is what everybody kind of does, overcompensate in some type of shape, form, or fashion. You know, whether it be drugs, women, men, vices, whatever vices you have. So that's something that we would like to address and talk about.
Right. And I just want to add to that. Side note, can you get her bottle?
Side note.
It's right there.
Okay.
While I'm talking about my overcompensation, so y'all don't have to hear her the whole time. But I would say, just on the relationship standpoint, for me too, was, being a young girl trying to learn how to, or what kind of person that I wanted to date. I would, talk to a guy, and if they didn't have one thing, like for instance, I was like, oh, he's not very ambitious, or whatever the case is, then the next person I would overlook for someone that's ambitious. And then they would have no emotional intelligence or something. So then the next person I would focus on the emotional intelligence. So it was always me trying to find what was missing in the last person instead of stopping and being like, okay, what is missing in me that's making me pick these people that don't make sense for what I want and what I need in life? And I came to grips with it. Was just like I didn't want to be by myself. And then you got to look at why do I not want to be by myself? Well, because there was things that I didn't want to acknowledge, and that was the holes in me. I was not whole. So, in order for me to have a relationship that was solid, I had to take the time to work on myself. Um, so I just wanted to add that in there too on the relationship side is, don't try to jump from relationship to relationship trying to find what you think you're missing if you haven't worked on yourself.
Yeah, and that's what I was overcompensating a lot of think in college. Like I was not treating Travis right. And I think that was the biggest issue with all of the things that I've looked back in my life of college was I didn't treat people fairly. I've prayed and asked for their forgiveness through God and pray that they are doing well in life. And I just know that for me, the overcompensation was, and again, it's this world, right? I think with overcompensation too, we get into what the Bible tells us not to get into, which is conforming to this world.
Yeah.
I was conforming to this world, right? I hate looking back, and I hate it's a strong word, but I really do. I hate looking back at myself and saying, man, I really treated that person unfairly.
Right.
Because I was of the world. I wasn't being the light and the salt of the earth like I was supposed to be. And I think that was the issue with some of the issues that I had on the field. Because, again, in high school, I felt, oh, man, I was doing great because I was doing the things I needed to do. And I felt like I was treating people fairly. And I was still in my Bible. I would read my FCA Bible. And I was pouring back into the vessel that God gave me.
Right.
But when I was in college, again, I wasn't. I was, and we all do. And I think that's again why we wanted to do this show. Again, why we wanted to do this podcast is because of those things. We fight daily to not do, but we do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was Peter. I want to say it was Peter. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he says, "Why do I do the things that I ought not to do when I know that I ought to do, but I do the things that I don't want to do?" What do you say? I do the things. I don't do the things that I know that I should do, but I do the things that I know that I shouldn't do. I'm paraphrasing, but it's something along those lines.
Something along that line, yeah.
Where he says that, and it was very interesting because it's like, why couldn't you? But now looking back, I get it, right? I understand that. So, again, I'm always looking at the mirror and looking at what can I do, get better, kind of like what you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
But it's something that we all got to learn and go through. And I think if you have, like, what open communication with parents and with siblings and not hiding yourself and possibly with friends as well, that they can help hold you accountable to those things so you're not overcompensating.
Right.
But what is something that, actually, you kind of touched on it earlier. You said you were not really working on the things that you needed to work on.
Yeah, I would focus on other people. Like mine was a lot about people, like
I
other
think
people.
everybody is usually.
Friends and relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would be like, oh, this person needs to work on this, or they did me wrong, or anything like that.
Okay, so you was the stick in the eye person.
Yeah, I was pointing that finger hard. And I knew that I made mistakes. Like it was never that I felt like I was perfect, but I would look at how I felt in the situation, and I wouldn't look from their point of view.
Yeah.
And so then I would go and be like, okay, well, that didn't work or whatever, and move on to the next thing or the next person or whatever, and nothing was getting fixed. Well, what's the saying? Like, okay, if it continues to happen, maybe you should look at yourself. And eventually, once I matured more, that's what I did. I reflected, like, okay, why do I keep having these issues? Why do I keep having these friends that all of a sudden they just switch up or whatever? So I had to take a hard look in the mirror and be like, okay, what do I need to work on? And there's things I still have to work on, but it helped me to be whole in myself. So
Yeah, and I think it kind of goes all along with this other verse, Matthew 6:33. It says, "But seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you."
yeah,
And again, that was something I wasn't doing, and now continuously, I really try to do this. Again, I'm gonna keep saying it every single week so people understand it. Do those first 15 minutes
yeah,
before you leave the house. Do your 5 minutes of prayer. Do your 5 minutes of book reading. Do your 5 minutes of silence. Listen to God, because He wants you to seek first His kingdom, and again, that will help you to not overcompensate,
right,
right? Because He's going to fill you up with the things that you need to be filled with.
correct,
And so I think that's the biggest thing that I'm taking away from this series is I already have everything that He has
Gave
promised
us,
and
yeah.
gave us.
yeah,
I already have it all. I just have to first seek His kingdom.
right,
And if I do those things, now again, it's not going to come tomorrow. It's probably not going to come next week. And it's probably not going to come a month from now. But eventually, it's going to click, and you're going to be like, okay, so that's what this means.
right,
But also, I think along with the being whole, you have to stop avoiding the void.
mm-hmm,
You have to stop not facing the issue that is at hand. Kind of like what you were saying about looking at everybody else. And there's a saying, you point one finger at you, there's like 4, 5, 10 pointed back at you.
mm-hmm,
And so I feel I never did that, but I'm pretty sure I probably did at some point in my life. And I feel like I'm a very introspective person. But again, I could have been like, man, it was their fault that I did this.
Right.
And lo and behold, it truly was myself that was holding myself back. And you're always going to be the one that's holding yourself back.
yeah. I think we live kind of in a time where people, I mean, it's always been there, but I feel like it's worse now, where people play the victim card a lot.
Oh, it's, I think, 100% worse.
I'm trying to figure out how to nicely say it, but it's like we need to take more ownership of, when we make those mistakes and when we,
Right.
because it's okay. We all make mistakes. We're all growing. Things change over time, as we've talked about, and so sometimes you have to adjust and make those changes. But when you can't acknowledge where you were wrong, that makes you stagnant in your growth, and it's not going to help you get to where you want to get to, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I think we try to add things in hopes of fulfillment as well. Like, I'm going to add this, and I'm going to hope that this makes things better.
Right.
But again, first seek His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. And I think that is a big part of where we are not doing a good job at. And it's getting, like you just said too, though, the ownership part, right?
Gotta take ownership.
It's crazy. I will excuse my wife. We like to send each other a bunch of Instagram videos because it's just, that's like our love language.
I was gonna say, no, I've seen reels where it's like, are you really married if you don't send your spouse like 100 reels a day? And I was like, well, we for real married.
Yeah, because we both do it hand in hand. But I just forgot my train of thought. There was a video.
Sorry.
There was a video that you sent me that I was like, ooh, that makes sense. Ah, gosh, what was it?
I sent a lot of videos.
I know, but this one,
this
one here was like it goes to kind of what we were talking about.
Well, think about it, because I got something to say.
Well,
so,
say what you don't say.
No, I was just gonna say, like, making sure with the avoiding the void, like, what we're talking about too is, like he said, facing those real issues, but like understanding that, like, in order for you to get better, you literally have to face them. Like, there's no way around it, because if you continue to put it on the back burner or act like it didn't happen, it works for a while, but then it's gonna rear its ugly head at the worst possible moments.
Mm-hmm.
I know when we first got married, we had we didn't really argue, but we had weird moments. And I feel like those weird moments stemmed from things that were issues we already had that we kind of suppressed. And instead of us working on them beforehand, we didn't really work on them, and so it caused us to have issues until we called each other out on it and worked on it. And so sometimes that's what you have to do. And here's Miss Robin. Hi, Robin. She's
She
like,
just
girl,
woke
I
up.
just woke up.
Yeah.
But it's like a cracked glass. Like, yes, the glass looks good, like it still works and everything. But then when you actually try to pour something into it, what's going to happen? It's going to leak everywhere. And
Right.
so it's not really holding anything. And that's because you didn't fix the glass where it was cracked. And that's the same thing with us in life, is if you don't work on the things that you need to work on, eventually it's going to leak everywhere. So
Yeah, and I think that's again what we do. We conform to this world, being people, right, and being a believer, being an ambassador of heaven, of God. We have to kind of fight that, and it's hard to fight it, But again, we need accountability partners,
right.
right, and that's the people that you can trust, that say, hey. And we kind of had a tiffle like that earlier, right?
I was gonna say, I'm gonna say something. You're gonna be like, why you say that?
We kind of had a little tiff earlier about it because we want to hold each other accountable. And I had said something rude to my little princess here, Robin, and I, rightfully so, got called out on it. And if you know me, I always got something to say back. And I was like, I don't feel like I felt like I did a better job of like containing myself, but it still came out some type of way. And she held me accountable. And again, we like to do things differently here. I never once got apologized to by my parents, ever. So we wanted to make sure that was something that we both did when we get into our children, or if we said something that wasn't 100% that was good, right? And I apologized, Robin. I said, Daddy, sorry. And do you forgive me? Sure. Which is her yes, right? So we just want to make sure that we're always fixing ourselves. And again, I could have avoided the void and let the cloud of upset and angriness and whatever else hang over us. But again, I don't want to do that. We always want to face our issues together. And sometimes we do it, solo dolo. But because we also are going to look inward and say, you know what, Travis, was I wrong?
Yeah.
And if I come back in my head and I'm like, yeah, that was out of pocket, then I'm gonna apologize. Like if I felt like it was deserved or whatever, I'm not gonna. I'm not gonna apologize for how.
Yeah.
I say something if it is.
On this. Sorry to cut you off, but I would say I was just gonna add in a relationship tidbit. Like we've said before, always communicating. Did I want to say something? No, because I know my husband and I know that he's a spicy one sometimes. But I knew that it was important for me to say something and hold him accountable, because we've talked about, how we want to raise our kids. But also, like, so y'all don't think it's just him. Like the other day, he was trying to help our daughter sleep in her bed, and she was hollering bloody murder at 2 a.m. And I went in the room trying to help, and I realized that it could have came off as me like overstepping while he was trying to parent. And so I said something to him. We communicated about it, and I was like, hey, I wasn't trying to, if you felt that way, like, I apologize, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, no, it was fine. It was 2 a.m. I was tired, blah, blah, blah. But the fact is, I could have just let it be and been like, well, I had to go help because I heard her crying. But I took that moment to look from his point of view, because we've had conversations about it. and really communicate that with him. So I just wanted to throw that relationship tidbit in there when it comes to avoiding the void too. When you're trying to work through things that you may have issues with, you have to communicate with your partner.
Yeah.
Because it ultimately helps you to be better.
Yeah. And again, this brings me to my point of there's bad things on the airwaves, and people's like, oh, do you want to do 50-50? You don't do 50-50. You don't do, and there's no such thing as 50-50.
Right.
Right. 50-50 is you're a half a person. Right. You have half of half an argument. Right. You have whatever. It is 100 and 100. Right. We are both going to do the things that we need to do to make sure that this relationship is something that is constantly on the up and up and constantly improving. Girl, take the bite.
Well, you think about it too. Like if somebody came up to you and was like, "Hey, I got this great guy for you," or girl, whatever, you know, he's handsome, he's got a job, all this stuff, and you're like, "Oh, okay, cool." Oh, but he's only like half a person. Like he's not a. He's only half a person. Like he half of the time works. He half the time is nice to you. He's half the time. Nobody's gonna want to deal with a half a time person.
Right.
You want someone that's all in with you. And
Yeah.
That's the same thing.
Yeah, and we've talked about this plenty of times, but we're always going to reiterate it that it has to be 100-100. Right? Like in today's time, most of the people out here, it's tragic out in the streets. I talked to a buddy of mine. He was like, bro, he's like, I would love to find a girl to go in with me in life, but something always happens to where it's like not, I guess, conducive enough for him to like do it, or like the relationship just falls off or something.
Yeah.
And you know, I saw, you know, most people are like wanting to be pimped in a sense. I sent my wife this. I'm about to explain what I mean by that. Is like the video or the message I showed you yesterday with the person was like, hey, I know we just started talking, and they was talking for like 2 months.
Oh yeah.
And she asked the dude for $300 to pay her child's daycare, and it's like, one, the audacity.
Right.
Right.
I don't even know.
But two, why are you asking a man to do that when he's not your husband?
Yeah.
And y'all not even dating.
Yeah.
Right.
It's funny because like it'll be like, oh, I don't need a man, and then they're like, but can you?
Yeah, and it's like that is the stuff that needs to be fixed.
Right.
Like we need some healing in the relationship realm, where people are fixing and acknowledging their insufficiencies, and are able to go to therapy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or at least able to get some unbiased. What is it? Where I'm looking for unbiased opinion. There, thank you. From someone, right? There is one. I don't know if it's a podcast, but the people come on the stage. There's like 6 people on stage. I think it's usually 3 guys, 3 girls, and they really give out really good advice.
They do.
You know, and it might cut you a little deep, but at the end of the time, at the end of the day, people need honesty.
Sometimes
like
you gotta get cut.
You gotta get cut deep. People are we become a soft generation. Like if I told you, hey man, you need to fix this, this, and this, then it's like, bro, why are you yelling at me? Or why are you trying to change me? And it's like, no, man, I'm just trying to help you improve yourself. Right? And whatever that show is, that's one of the shows that I'm like, I actually like that show. And usually when I listen to it, there's actually a lot of good information that these people are passing on to people that are wanting to get better in their relationships.
Yeah.
Gosh, I can't think of it. When I find it and when I can do it next time, I'll let you know.
I just remembered, it wasn't from them, but just what we're talking about with the 50-50, from a woman's standpoint, I can't remember this girl's name, but I just remembered I was like, I'm going to one day mention this on Happily Ever After Hours. She was talking about like how women are like, what do men bring to the table? And, you know, I need to know beforehand because blah, blah, blah. And she was like, okay, well, look at it from from his point of view. What do you bring to the table? And so there were some other women like, well, I'm a good mother, or I can cook, or I'm ambitious, whatever. And she was like, I'm the whole table. And I was like, okay, sis. And that really like resonated with me because she was like, I'm whatever the table need. I'm whatever we need. Like I'm the table. So like it's not just that one thing that I bring to the table. Like if in this season we need financial help, or we both are pitching in, then she was like, I'm here. Or if we're in the season of, I'm with the kids nurturing, I pick up more, like I'm at home with the kids more, whatever the case is. Yeah. She was just saying whatever the season is, that's what I have on my table. And that for me is the definition of being whole as a wife. And I was just like, wow, like I love that. Like, because we people say that all the time, like, what do you bring to the table? And they start listing off stuff. But like, to be so confident in yourself and to feel so whole in who you are, to say, no, I am the table. Like, whatever the situation is, I'm a morph into what we need in that time for our family.
Yeah, and I think that's a healthy outlook on life.
Yeah.
As well, right? And it doesn't just go for the women; it goes for both sides, right?
Right.
I might have to be like, for instance, last week. Well, since you gave birth, I've picked up more on the house cleaning side, right? Men clean the house, right? It's your home too. But I've picked up more on that. I picked up on I did all the cooking, right?
He did, y'all. And I'm talking about homemade from scratch meals. We was in here eating good. My mom was like, Travis in there throwing down. I was like, yeah.
I try to do what I can do when I can do it. You know what I'm saying? Because at the end of the day, I want to make sure that we're good. And I'm always trying to level up. I'm always trying to figure out how to be better. It's my approach in life, I guess, from playing sports and then into coaching. I always try to find how I can be better than the week before, right? And I'm not competing with nobody. Now, again, I do see that, oh, man, I'm glad that they're doing well and they're doing well. But, again, I'm competing against me versus me. And our relationship is our relationship against what we did last year, last month, last year.
Yeah.
It's not against what is in the media. It's not with what is on TV. You know what I'm saying? So we're always trying to figure out how we can get better and making sure that we're whole.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you for joining here on Happily Ever After Hours. We hope that you enjoyed our show. Peace, love, and may God bless you.